Jerky's Machine, most entertaining channel you've ever seen. He's always making lots of interesting scenes for you to watch on YouTube.
Alright, we're moving right along in this series. In the last episode, our fearless leader, Craig Barnett, showed us the components that would make up the new amp. He completed the board fabrication and prepped the chassis for installation. While we were away, Craig ventured on without us and got the board assembled and all the components soldered into place. Coming up, we get a tour of the completed items as well as a glimpse at our graphics. Then Craig gets the chassis painted and the front panel ready to install the switches and controls.
All right, so here is your populated circuit board. I finished putting all the turrets on, obviously, and then loaded everything on here with an eye towards leaving things unsoldered at the end where I'm going to be wiring them to the sockets or to power or what have you. I also used a little bit of silicone to kind of tie things together so that under heavy vibration we aren't getting vibration noises coming out through the speaker, which can happen. Mm-hmm. So I'm not real big on slopping a bunch of goop on stuff, but I did put them in place. I did put it in places where I didn't want stuff to move at all. Mm-hmm. Your cathode bias resistor being one of them, and your power supply. I've got it on there too. Over here is your preamp power supply. So that's your circuit board, and as we had on the earlier episode, we mapped out where the holes were going to be so that it can just slip right into the chassis, and it fits right on there pretty good. So it's kind of up at this angle, and then it bolts from the other side. The preamp side was the side that I was kind of like, how am I going to do this? So what I did was I took a little piece of brass and cut it out to this shape here, and traced, using the actual chassis itself, traced where they lay and punched holes in it with a chassis punch. And then did a little bit of pre-wiring so that when I get my hands inside here, inside the chassis with my soldering iron, this would be literally impossible to get all of this wiring done inside the chassis, especially with the circuit board in the way. It would just be impossible practically. So as much of it I can do outside of the chassis, I'm going to do. There's still a little bit more to do. I'll have leads coming off where they're going to go to the circuit board, and then so this will be pre-wired here, and this slips right into the holes that I made for this, and it will bolt down. Then once that's in, then this will slip in behind it, and then I'll be able to take the wires and route them to where they go and get my soldering iron in there without, bumping wires and having other stuff in the way. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the power tube sockets, but since there's less connections to deal with on those, I really pretty much have those ready to drop in here. And so I'll be able to throw these in here and bolt them down, and then I'll wire the power side. I could go either way. I suppose I could go power side first and then preamp side, but I think I'm going to go with the preamp side first. And then I decided that we would just keep this piece right here, this little printed circuit board that has the power from the wall coming in and the fuse. That will go in here and slip right in nicely, just where it was before. Look at the Hammond schematic for this power transformer and realize that 2 and 3 are the primaries. That's where the 120 volts from the wall comes in. And then parallel to that is a secondary that outputs 120 volts. And that will go directly to your pilot light. So this is actually a secondary, and that's what lit the rocker switch. So when you put 120 volts on the primary right here, you get 120 volts out on this, and it's just a convenient way for them to light the rocker switch. So I didn't like how close this 25 volt secondary is to this nut right here. I mean, it's just so damn close that if anything were to somehow come dislodged and get in between there, yeah, that would probably cause a little fireworks show. Yeah. I'm not really sure if I can solder to these or not, or if I need to use the little connectors that Marshall had. At first I was thinking, well, I'll just put the choke right here because we've got room for it.
Yeah.
But I'm still not sure, since our supplier hasn't gotten us our VBR boards. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to clear the edge of the circuit board right here. I need that real estate right there to make my own board and run the wires over to where the pot is. This is your MOSFET right here. It's got a little mica spacer. I don't know if the camera's picking up that clear thing that's sitting on top of it. Here's the mica spacer, so that gets laid onto where you're going to bolt it down. Now you can see it a little bit better.
Yep.
Gets bolted down to the chassis like so, and then on the other side of the chassis we bolt what's called a heat sink. That pulls the heat away from this thing and keeps it from overheating. I might need this edge of the chassis over here for that. Right here would be a good spot for it too. It's not gonna interfere with our speaker at all because it's below this plane. We'll have to make a larger hole right here with a grommet, a little rubber thing that fits inside of the hole that keeps the wires from coming up against rough metal or anything that could damage the wire.
Yeah.
Right around where the power tubes are, right around where it gets connected to the board. It'll be nice and compact. It's a perfect spot for it. In fact, I think that's where it's going to go. And then the other thing that we're thinking about, of course, is getting our front panel done. So I've kind of marked off where things could go. And so we've got our pilot light here, which I could move over into one of these void spots right here where the rocker switches were. But I want to keep the switches on a really robust piece of metal for mounting, so they aren't rocking or, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want anything that you're pulling on like that to be flexing at all. Power, standby, or reverse, it doesn't matter. And then probably about over here is far enough away from our audio path to put our voltage control. And then we've got bass, treble, volume, and then our input right here. I think it'll be a very uncongested, nice look when you get the knobs put on there. They clear each other, so if you've got your your volume turned this way and your treble turned that way, they don't bump into each other. And then we got to do the same thing on the back because we've got just kind of this ugly where I scraped all of the adhesive off. I did also make this little plate which will be able to cover up the stain left from the Marshall where it got a little faded.
Aged, yeah.
It's aged grill cloth, and so I made this that just covers it, and we'll be able to put a little logo on here. So you got your name badge ready to go. I just need to drill some holes to put it in. So that will be the front plate. That'll go on the speaker baffle. And that's almost the size that it really is. Yeah, almost to scale.
It never ceases to amaze me what Craig is capable of, and the way this board came together is a fantastic example. Craig's tracing the outline of the chassis front panel onto a sheet of metal to make a new faceplate. He uses a simple brass-colored kick plate for a door that you can pick up at a hardware store. The material is fairly easy to work with and is nice and thin.
So when you put your components out through there, it's thin enough so that I've still got threads hanging out, and it's just easy to cut, and it looks nice.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's like a veneer, right?
It's kind of a veneer, yeah. It's basically what it is exactly. If I cut along this line carefully, I'll have enough for the back. But on this side, there's a film on here that's, it's the same thing as the decals you get with a plastic model kit. Run this through your printer with your art that you want on your computer. This is clear stuff, so when it comes off, it's clear, and all you'll see is just the black lettering, and then the gold anodized on the other side of the sheet. It's gold. I want to keep this vent here because we've got our power tubes venting up through the inside of the chassis, and so we want somewhere for the air to escape. What I can do is I can just spray paint this back panel, apply the decals right onto the chassis, and I won't need a plate for the back. We might want to do that. Lightly sand this so that any scrape marks that I made when I was getting the adhesive off of here. I think before we go too far though, what I'm going to want to do is drill like a couple of these holes, so that we can throw a pot or a switch or whatever it is on the panel on here, so that you can kind of see what it'll look like without the facade on there. So I want to make sure when I'm committed to drilling holes on the actual front plate, the holes are where we want them to be.
Craig removes the transformers from the chassis to keep them free of any debris or metal shavings while getting it sanded and prepped for painting.
I'm just going to run a little sand bar.
Getting closer with every step.
Yeah. Laugh at me if you want, but this is how I've done it before to get it burning off a little bit. Ain't gonna hurt.
And look at how the brown paint job came off on the back. Looks nice, nice
Does
and
look
clean.
good. So now we can kind of get an idea what it's going to look like, but at least we can kind of see how your knobs are going to look. So we'll just, the other side has a bunch of jagged metal sticking out, so I'm just going to kind of tack these on here real quick. So if you had them adjusted to where they were opposing each other like that, you know.
They have clearance.
You got clearance. So right about here is where I'm going to put the input. So was just a slight amount over like that. Possibly even we could go here, because I think there's enough room to in between here to get that in there. Measuring here, I'm finding that I'm going to need to put the light in like at least 2.5 inches, probably more like 2 3/4. So that's going to move our input over about the same. Which matches actually better where that line is going to go directly out into the first preamp tube.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a shorter distance, which is probably a good thing. We can always relocate it to a different spot if we had to, but and then see what 2 3/4 is on this end, because that's where I'm going to want to put the light. Is going to be right about here, so it's perfect.
About center on that.
Yeah, and since the light isn't taking any kind of push-pull or anything, you're not going to be really touching it. It'll be supported plenty by this plate itself, and so I don't have to worry about that. But any kind of switch or something you're going to be grabbing hold of, I don't want to be supported only by that.
Yeah.
So if we went like right about there, and you know, we can put them closer together like this here. So we've got 2 3/4, and then let's make it an entire 2 3/4, so 3 3/4 or 4. Okay, so I've got it 1 1/4 away. If I use this mark here for either power or standby, let's say. When we get that board, I'm not going to drill any holes for the VVR yet, because we want to make sure the actual module that we get in the mail actually clears the board, that we don't have a hole squarely in the way of these right here. It'd be better if it was hovering over the top of here just slightly, like say like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if it's going to be able to fit. So, but we've got that extra spot that we talked about earlier on the opposing side of where the choke will be mounted.
All right, well, we're going to call it a day today. Lots got done. Craig, thanks again for spec
Sure.
going.
So we're our supplier for the pre-made VVR circuit board. We're not exactly sure if that's going to fit, or I'm going to have to make one and place it in a different place on the chassis so that I've got room for a heat sink and all of that good stuff. So I'm not able to really finish with the drilling of the front panel. What I will be able to do though is, here's the input. We got that hole drilled. We got our gain or volume control, our treble, and our bass. And then somewhere over in this real estate here will be, I'm thinking right here is a good spot, will be where our VVR pot and hopefully the module will fit. If it's just the pot that will fit there, then I'll be making another board that fits on another place in the chassis so that we're able to get that installed and not have any conflict with the circuit board. So, but we've got a really good handle on that, and then we've got our power switch holes here, and in this area right here is where we will have the pilot light. So it'll roughly be spaced evenly. Everything will kind of lay out nicely on top here. So getting this plate done was kind of a nice thing, and I'm glad that's out of the way. So what I'll do is I'll lay this on here. get it squared up to where it's going to fit. I'll make sure and slip it into the box there and make sure that everything clears and it doesn't hang up at all when you push it into the speaker box.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll tape it off on either side. And then what I'll do, I'll throw a piece of masking tape on either side here and here just to kind of pinch it on there in the right spot. Then what I will do once it's being held there is I'll take my Sharpie on the inside. I'm going to need to clean the other side of these holes where I've drilled. As you can see, there's a bunch of metal that needs to come off. So all that's going to have to be scraped or filed off of there, or I can take my Dremel tool and grind it out. And then we got our back panel painted, which is kind of nice too. And I'll be working on the graphic stuff for the front and back maybe tomorrow. I'll be able to put some of the graphic stuff on here and get it clear going on. We're looking pretty on schedule for what we figured to being able to have it built within the next few weeks to where we can power it up and see what happens.
All right. Well, thanks, Craig. In our next episode, the final assembly work is well underway. Craig puts the finishing touches on the effects loop board, and the front panel switches and controls get installed. This amp is really starting to take shape. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
It's Shirky's Machine, most entertaining channel you've ever seen. He's always making lots of interesting scenes for you to watch on YouTube.